Iowa beats Rutgers 38-28 in a very back and forth offensive game where Iowa's special teams won the day, their defensive adjustments won the day, and ultimately helped them pull away with an interception late fourth quarter that helped Iowa build a double-digit lead. And at that point, Rutgers was too far behind, too late to really do much about it. This game is why I love Friday Night Football. Last year, Rutgers beat Washington on a Friday night game. Nebraska, home team, favorite, almost by double digits and at one point by 2 scores in the nines, lost to Illinois Friday night. Oregon-Purdue was pretty boring in the Big Ten slate of Friday night games last year, same with Oregon-Michigan State, but Oregon was a 13-1 Big Ten champion last year. This was a very entertaining football game. I loved every second of it. I was deeply involved, emotionally involved. I was incorrect in my prediction for picking Rutgers to win. However, this was a toss-up, and there were many paths for Rutgers to win. Iowa was just the more fundamentally sound team that took advantage of the opportunities in front of them, and, well, Rutgers didn't do that. They took advantage of some issues that Iowa's been plagued with last year and so far this year, as in Iowa's defensive back play. I don't think that Phil Parker has the defensive backs he wants. It's just my thoughts and my analysis there. But I still believe that Iowa's defense is a competent Big Ten unit at the absolute worst. I think that Phil Parker is one of the best defensive coordinators in America, and I think that this game shows why. It also shows why LeVar Woods is the nation's best special teams coordinator for Iowa. Rutgers entered this game with the #1 special teams unit per ESPN's efficiency. I think I bought into it a little bit too much as I picked it over Iowa's, saying that I would favor Rutgers special teams over Iowa's just slightly. Well, Iowa's 1 of 2 on field goals. Rutgers was 0 of 2. Iowa had a kickoff return for a touchdown, where if they didn't have that, there's a chance Rutgers wins. We'll talk about this later on, but if you look at the point differential between the points that Iowa's special teams scored versus the points that Rutgers special teams unit either missed out on or that Iowa forced them to miss out on, if the margin between special teams were equal and they both scored the same amount of points and allowed the same amount of points, Rutgers would have won this game, actually. Iowa's special teams, along with defensive adjustments and Iowa staying calm early in the game, even though Rutgers was able to really get behind their defensive backs, going 6 out of 12 on deep shots, that's what won the Hawkeyes the game in very impressive fashion. Rutgers held a 20-minute to 10-minute possession advantage entering halftime about. Well, Iowa had a nearly 20-minute second half to 10-minute for Rutgers possession advantage in the third and fourth quarter. A tale of two halves, really. Iowa outscoring Rutgers 17-7 in that second half, tale of two halves. And Rutgers and Iowa were tied entering halftime. A lot of that had to do with special teams, though. Rutgers really dominated that first half with Iowa special teams helping them hang in there, and then Iowa took control of the game and established themselves in that second half. I know we're 4 minutes in, but it's because I'm passionate. That's why I forgot to ask you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, comment your thoughts down below. So please do those things if you have not already. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bell. Comment your reaction to this game down below. I was wrong here, again. Just by again, I don't mean like for the second game in a row, although that could be the case tomorrow. We'll see where my picks land. I mean in the sense of, I mentioned it earlier in the video. I thought that Rutgers was going to win for a variety of reasons that they showed me in this game. They had the air attack edge. Iowa had the ground attack edge. But really, I think the difference in special teams here was huge. A few things to talk about before we get on to that and some of the key takeaways to show you how big of an edge Iowa's special teams had. So Rutgers allowed 3 sacks, Iowa allowed 2. Both had power rushing success rate. This is where if it's 2nd and 2, 3rd and 2, if you're 2 yards away from the first down line or the end zone or shorter, can you punch it in? Both had a ton of success in power rushing success zones. Iowa was 3 of 8 on 3rd down. They just didn't have too many 3rd downs. They were able to really run the ball and keep on pace, be on schedule offensively. Rutgers was 6 of 10 on 3rd down, or 6 of 13 on 3rd down. 0 of 1 on 4th down. That 4th down, though, was at the end of the game, down by 10. Don't have enough timeouts to where if you don't get an onside kick, you're not going to win. I don't really count that against them. Don't really. There were several mistakes that came and predicated before that 4th down conversion. That was, in a certain sense, almost, you're trying to win because you want to win, but you're not realistically going to win at the time where it was, a little over a minute left. You only have 1 timeout left. The 2-minute warning's already passed. Unless you get an onside kick against an awesome Iowa special teams unit, you're not going to win the game, even if you get a touchdown and convert the 4th and 2. It's just not going to happen. Passing offense. Iowa averaged 10.3 yards per attempt with 186 yards. Gronowski looked pretty good. He had some missed balls, had some throws, but he had a really good game. That pass to Howard, wide receiver for Iowa, that was beautiful. That was like a perfect NFL throw that highlighted his accuracy, his arm strength. He looked good in this game, and Athan Kaliakmanis did too. I thought that Kaliakmanis had a lot of zip on the ball. He placed it well. That one interception really wasn't his fault. I mean, maybe he could have had better pocket awareness, but he had someone deep, I believe, and that was a wonderful play by future NFL defensive end Max Llewellyn, who beat his man lining up against him on the offensive line. Rutgers, by the way, offensive line's already been plagued with injuries. Their team was dropping like flies for the entire game. I don't put this one on Kaliakmanis at all. To go 8.3 yards per attempt on an Iowa secondary that, yes, isn't what it usually is or what we're accustomed to under Phil Parker. Is it the best thing in the world? No, but I think it's very impressive. 24 of 40, 330 yards, 8.3 yards per attempt. Rutgers couldn't even run for 4 yards per carry. They ran for 3.6 yards per carry when you adjust for sacks. So really, whenever they ran the ball, more often than not, they were putting themselves behind the chains and making it harder on Kaliakmanis. It was really him, Ian Strong, who looked amazing, KJ Duff, who looked good, DT Sheffield, Kenny Fletcher had some impressive catches. Rutgers has a legitimate passing offense. It is a good, great, definitely among the upper third of passing offenses, I would say, in America. I mean, Kaliakmanis had a 77.4 quarterback efficiency rating. Rocco Becht looked like nothing compared to Kaliakmanis when you study their games against Iowa's defense. Becht looked like just a good college quarterback, and Kaliakmanis looked like a great, elite college quarterback. Again, relativity. I know that Kaliakmanis is not elite. I know that Rocco Becht is good, but I don't know if he's as good as maybe some other more national analysts think he is, for example. He definitely has toughness and clutchness to him. I think Kaliakmanis displayed some of that tonight. But I was just talking about relative to how they performed against Iowa. Kaliakmanis looked amazing, and Beck just kind of looked like, okay, you did what you could do, and you also had some things go your way. Not much, I don't think, went Kaliakmanis' way tonight. The game was on him, and when you don't have a rushing attack that is very effective, and your special teams flails, and you don't have a defense, you can't have a ton of success. That's at least one extreme takeaway, that Rutgers doesn't have a defense. And I genuinely think with the efficiency metrics, how they played against Ohio, Miami of Ohio, how they played in this game, I think their defense is among one of the worst defenses in the Power Four right now. They can't stay healthy. They don't have a lot of speed. It doesn't look like they're very talented, either that or they're poorly conditioned or developed. It's a mess for the second year in a row for Rutgers defense. But I would also say, to be fair, that Iowa's offense is much better. Gronowski is throwing the ball at a level that we have not seen from an Iowa quarterback since Nate Stanley. I still think Iowa's offensive line is really good. They were constantly getting push in this game. They just don't have Caleb Johnson. If they had Caleb Johnson in this offense, I think they could be averaging 7 yards per carry right now, and they probably beat Iowa State, and they could be viewed as a playoff sleeper if they had Caleb Johnson. Their receivers are better. Quarterback is better. Tight end is worse only because of Strang is out for the year, which is really tragic, but it's still serviceable and good. O-line is really good. Running back is deep. You just don't have a Caleb Johnson there. I was impressed with Iowa's offense. So there's a little bit of truth in both, that Iowa's offense, I think, is at its best that it's been since 2020, 2019, and Rutgers' defense is at an all-time low. That's a huge question I have for Rutgers, is where is their defense? I don't know where it is, and I don't exactly know what the solution is, because A, I'm not a coach, and B, even if I try to in my mind look at their roster, look at their schedule, look at through their first 4 games, I don't exactly know what you can do, because you're going to be facing so much better offenses from here on out in Big Ten play. You know, you play Penn State, you play Oregon, you play Ohio State, you play Illinois, you play Washington on the road. Minnesota, I don't think, is a better offense than Iowa, but is it that much worse? No, when you play them on the road. And there are other teams that you play in Big Ten play. But the fact that the majority of your remaining opponents probably have a better offense than Iowa, and a lot of them are better teams, period, than Iowa overall, is cause for concern for sure. As for Gronowski, can they keep this up? Can he keep this up? Because if he can, Iowa, I think, has a really good chance of pulling some wins together that, as of a few days ago or a few weeks ago, I and the vast majority of others, probably even some Iowa fans themselves, especially after those first 2 games where Gronowski really struggled, thought they couldn't pull those wins together. There is a sliver of a chance, but a chance far greater than they would have had last year or the year before that, of beating one of Indiana, Penn State, Oregon at home. I think those are 3 top 10 caliber teams, all on Iowa's schedule, all in Kinnick. That is so much better for Iowa than playing any of them on the road. So much better. And if Gronowski plays like this, and Iowa can stay healthy, and maybe Parker can try to figure out secondary a little bit, and it improves, they can beat one of those teams. And they can play the other 2, or at least one of the other 2, competitively. And they can probably win some games on the road. I mean, think about Iowa last year. They really struggled on the road, in large part because of quarterback play and health, along with some of their issues on defense that they had last year, where it wasn't as good as the 22-23 unit, 21 even. And that's even factoring, the change from the Big Ten West to the divisionless Big Ten. They won a road game tonight. They did. That is so critical. I said that if Iowa lost this game in my preview and prediction, so that if they lost this game, they wouldn't be going bowling. And if Rutgers lost this game, probably the same thing. Like, this was a critical game for either team's hopes of simply reaching a bowl game, because their schedules are both very tough. They're so much tougher than they were last year. So much tougher. It's kind of the inverse of what Michigan had. Michigan last year had a pretty tough schedule overall. Much easier this year. We'll see if they take advantage of it. Rutgers, very easy schedule last year. One of the hardest in the Big Ten. Iowa, probably mid-tier, because they had to play Ohio State on the road and had to play a 11-win Iowa State team. Mid-tier schedule, much harder schedule this season. You get the point. At least I hope you do. Iowa now 3-1, 1-0 in Big Ten play. They have 3 remaining wins on their schedule. And they can probably pull a 7th or an 8th out of their top hat, because Phil Parker is still a genius, and their special teams won them a road game, And it's not like Iowa's figured everything out. I don't think they figured everything out. Again, they have a transfer quarterback making his first start in a new offensive system. And by first start, I mean first year starting in a new offensive system with new players. He's got to build chemistry, and he's playing a much better, harder game than he did at the FCS level. I liken it, personally, to Max Brosmer at Minnesota, who only got better as the year goes on. I think you're going to see that with Gronowski. People were saying that he was immediately a bust through 2 games. I didn't like that. And this game is a reason why. I know Rutgers' defense is awful, but he looked better against Rutgers than Albany. And I know Rutgers is a much better defense than Albany does. It's a better defense probably than what UMass has. And talent-wise, I don't think it's that inferior to Iowa State's. It's definitely an inferior defense to the Cyclones, but by how much, realistically, we'll have to see as the season goes on. Holding Rutgers to 7 second-half points, Phil Parker made adjustments. They did a better job of getting pressure. I thought they sent more pressure in the second half and were able to win at a higher rate thanks to mostly their defensive line. Ethan Hurkett, Max Llewellyn in particular, Aaron Graves. That's the strength of this Iowa defense, is their defensive front, specifically the defensive line. And I think the further you go back in the defense, the weaker it gets, which is kind of the inverse of what we're used to with Phil Parker defenses. But this unit is a good, great unit regardless. It's, I think, a similar caliber to last year's, probably stronger up front, D-line, weaker at linebacker, and weaker at DB as well. Iowa special teams is legit. Number 1. So you've seen this on the screen now if you've been watching for probably a few minutes here. Iowa had a 16-point swing in their direction because of special teams. Think about that. So you get 3 from Drew Stevens making one of his field goals. You get 7 from Wheatgen's long return. By the way, he had a punt return. He nearly housed it before halftime. Should have stepped out of bounds. Yeah, didn't cost Iowa the game, though. It didn't. He's a wonderful returner. I mean, his speed, his athleticism, I love what he has, and also the awareness in terms of where his players are going to be positioned, how the blocks are going to set up. He is a weapon. Wheatgen is a weapon. So you get the 7, so that's 10. Where do the other 6 come from? They come from Jai Patel missing a field goal off a false start. If not for that false start, they make it. And Rutgers' final drive is, guess what? That 4th down now matters, because if you convert it, you can tie it up and send it to overtime, where your offense, I think, has an edge and might have been the best position on the field outside of Iowa's special teams. And then there's the blocked kick. It was Jai Patel's second kick that he missed, but that was more on his protection, where it was blocked. It's a 16-point swing. If Wheatgen doesn't return that kickoff for 6, and say Iowa probably starts off slow again, so they punt. If Drew Stevens misses that field goal, and if Patel makes both of his field goals, so that's basically flipping the special teams games. Now Rutgers had an amazing special teams performance, and Iowa's was disappointing. Then Rutgers wins this game. Special teams, in truth, was the tiebreaker here, and it went strongly in Iowa's direction. I want to touch on Rutgers and how I think they are fundamentally unsound. So they were dropping like flies. Iowa, meanwhile, was pretty strong, clearly bigger, clearly faster, at least in between the tackles. Rutgers receivers were faster, and Kaliakmanis is a more talented quarterback than Mark Gronowski. So skill position-wise, offensively, Rutgers was better. But really, in every other aspect, Iowa was better, or at least stronger, better conditioned, faster, seemed like the more Big Ten team at every position except for wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback, if I'm being honest. That right there will help compensate for a tricky road spot in kind of I think Piscataway at night, especially on a Friday night with short time to recuperate, I think that's a very tricky spot. It's a unique environment. The blackout is a now annual thing they do, where I think for probably 4 years in a row. Maybe it's just 2. I forget if they sold out for their blackout in 2023. They typically fill up the stadium, and it gets fairly loud. So I'm impressed with Iowa's win, and I'm depressed with the state of Rutgers. I thought that Rutgers last year was going to explode onto the field, win double-digit games, 9 games, not make the playoffs because the schedule would be too weak, but take advantage, and they didn't. And I thought they'd take advantage tonight of a specific matchup that I think favored them. Their receivers and Kaliakmanis against Iowa's passing defense that has looked very suspect over the past 2 seasons, counting this one. And they just didn't do it. Instead, Iowa took advantage. They took advantage of Rutgers' defensive issues, even going deep a few times and connecting offensively. They took advantage of Rutgers' tackle situation as the game progressed. And most importantly, they took advantage of special teams, of hidden yardage. Both quarterbacks, I think, are good, and both offenses certainly have flash. And I think the biggest example of how both offenses have flash is looking at their game on paper numbers. Iowa had a 52% success rate, 91st percentile. Success rate is if on first down you gain 50% of the yardage. That's a successful play. Second down, you gain, I believe it's 60% yardage of the necessary yardage to convert. And then third and fourth down, it's 100%. A 52 success rate is insane, no matter what defense you're playing. And as we've talked about, Rutgers' defense is pretty suspect. No matter what defense you play, that's very impressive. They scored 0.22 expected points added per play. That's also pretty impressive. And they averaged 6.5 yards per play, which was in the 69th percentile. And averaged 9.3 yards per dropback. It's only not above 10 as the numbers I used because game on paper, I think game on paper counts sacks against the passing game like the NFL does. They don't count it against the run. Rutgers was also in the 80th percentile in expected points added per rush. So those numbers, especially for Iowa, no matter what defense they play, very impressive. Rutgers had a 43% success rate, and they had a 0.13 expected points added per play. That against a Phil Parker defense is very impressive. Overall, those are my takeaways from this game. Those are my thoughts in it. That's my reaction and analysis. I think that Rutgers is going to have a really tough time moving forward, though I think they can pull off some upsets if they can find a way to mitigate. They won't fix this defense. This defense is beyond repair. But I imagine Shiano and the staff can mitigate it in some ways. And Kaliakmanis and those receivers, they showed that they are legitimate. So say someone doesn't take them as seriously as Iowa does, or someone has awful special teams and Rutgers wins there and blocks a punt as they've done pretty well this year, and Patel makes his field goals, they can pull off an upset. Rutgers is going to be an annoying team for anyone to deal with until maybe very late in the year when they have Ohio State, Penn State back-to-back, and those rosters will just be so good and Rutgers might be so injured that at that point it doesn't matter. I hope that doesn't happen, though. As for Iowa, they are a threat to be a top 25 team. And I said that after the Iowa State game. I'm a little bit more convinced of it right here. If Gronowski can keep this up especially, they're going to be a threat to ruin someone's playoff hopes. So thank you for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell. Now, don't just hit the bell for the channel. Hit the bell for any team playlists that you're interested in attached to the channel. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you around.